How are we doing this morning? I hope you're having a good morning. I was just reading my book, Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinski. I haven't read the whole thing. I'm piecing through it. I'm reading a bunch of different books right now, and I'm almost done with this. It's kind of I get really warm when I read this book, and it's not because I enjoy it. It's because I get a lot of anger when I read this book, because this book is what is being used to undermine the society in the United States of America. And it's so weird and simplistic on how it's complicated. There's a lot of complicated things in it, but if you take an overview of this book, it's very simplistic. And I just wanted to read the back of this to you, the back of the book real quick. It's the first time I've ever read the back of the book. I've had this book for about a couple months now. This country's leading hellraiser has set down some of the rules of the game. No one has had more experience or has been more successful at it than Alinski. That's from The Nation. The first published in 1971, Rules for Radicals is Saul Alinski's impassioned counsel to young radicals on how to effect constructive social change and know the difference between being a realistic radical and being a rhetorical one. And this is where people lose it here. They don't take these words seriously. They don't take the definition of these words seriously. Okay, this is not about, a fun book to read about organizing your friends, and this is about realistic radicals changing our country, radically changing our country. Our country was founded on the Constitution, so to change it radically, you'd have to alter the Constitution. Okay, that's the radical change that they're talking about. He wants you to believe that, let me read this. Realistic radical being, the difference between being a realistic radical and being a rhetorical one. Written in the midst of a radical political developments whose direction Alinski was one of the first to question, this volume exhibits his style at its best, like Thomas Paine before him. Thomas Paine was a revolutionary in the Revolutionary War against Britain, the United States of America. Thomas Paine was for freedom, and he's being likened to Thomas Paine, who fought for our constitutional rights. He was a radical because he wanted to get away from a monarchy and a totalitarian government that oppressed the people, and he wanted to get away from that. And to compare him to Thomas Paine, knowing how they're using this book, whether Alinski was like Thomas Paine or not, giving power back to the people, is neither here nor there, because the rules and the techniques that he's using and the tactics that he's using in this book are being used to undermine the freedoms. Let me just read this. Like Thomas Paine before him, Alinski was able to combine both in his person and his writing the intensity of political engagement with the absolute insistence on rational political discourse and adherence to the American democratic tradition. Alinski's techniques and teaching influenced generations of community and labor organizers, including the church-based group hiring a young Barack Obama to work on Chicago's South Side in the 1980s. Alinski impressed a young Hillary Clinton who was growing up in Park Ridge at the time. Alinski was the director of the Industrial Areas Foundation in Chicago. This came from the Chicago Sun-Times. See what they liked about this guy. Let me just explain what this is all about. This book talks about organizing the people, because obviously you're not going to take on an establishment with 5 people. You have to organize. And that's what Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama love so much about this book. about Alinski himself is he set forth in this book the ability to organize, the information that you need and the tactics to use to organize. And like I said, Alinski they liken him to Thomas Paine, and I think he likes to think of himself as Thomas Paine. They believe that the corporations were stifling the American people, and they were, the corporations were bulldozing the American people. That's what I get out. That's what I think Alinski was trying to say. And you need to organize these poor and minority people to rise up against them together, because together we stand, divided we fall. But what has happened is they've taken the books and this book and the tactics and the organizing skills from this book. They've taken this to undermine our society, to do the absolute opposite. And it's to take, they want you to believe it's to take from the haves and give to the have-nots, which means you have to create a economic class warfare between the masses, between the haves and the have-nots. But really what they're doing is they're taking from the have-nots and giving to the uber-haves. They're taking from everyone and giving to the uber-haves. Do you see what I mean? They're using this, and Alinski, I think Alinski would be rolling over in his grave if he saw what these people were doing. And all of these do-gooders who follow this, and who are part of the organizations like Acorn and Greenpeace, and you just name one, all of these social program organizations, just name them, they're in your town, they're in your cities. They're using it to destroy the society, to destroy capitalism. I think Alinski Alinski was a communist, obviously. So, not knowing Alinski, I know he was a Marxist communist agitator. So I'm unsure of what he really wanted, but I know what how they're using this. They're using it to destroy capitalism. And unfortunately, it's to give it to the uber elites like George Soros and all of these people who are helping them, financing all of these movements. And it's to take capitalism and the freedom and the power of capitalism from free individuals and give it to a group, a government, and have the government run the capitalism. Have government have power over the people instead of, like our Constitution says, people have the power. And they're organizing in such a way. Look at what's happening. They organized the unions, and what did the unions do? They destroyed the car industry. And then what happened to the car industry? Barack Obama owns them. And I say Barack Obama because he gave 50% of it, overwhelming majority of the GM, and, to the unions. And he's the union. So Barack Obama owns it. He owns the banks. He owns the insurance companies. He owns GE. He's not against corporations. Okay? The corporations are in on it. It's just in the end there'll be fewer corporations. He's attacking them, destroying the corporations, and wants to destroy the banks. So there'll only be a few banks, or one bank. And he's destroying the corporations and the companies so that there'll only be one corporation, like GE. There'll only be one insurance company, federal government. There will be only one oil company. Monopoly, communism. That's what it's all about. And that's what they're doing in this country. And they're using this stupid book to do it. And they've been organizing the masses, organizing the African Americans. They're all for this. Because they think they're going to get the power. But it's going to be a central government that's going to have power over everyone. And you will no longer have freedoms. Let the crackdown begin.